I, Yang Yi, am here. Tremble before me. Needless to say, Yang Yi wasn't keeping a low profile at all. However, it was exactly what he wanted. Because he was very well aware that he was bound to be unable to keep a low profile upon arriving in the large universe. Since he couldn't do that, he intended to make a show of strength. After Yang Yi instantly annihilated the yellow-robed man, he gazed at the others, causing their expressions to change drastically. Meanwhile, Yang Yi spoke coldly. Fuck off and tell the sovereign of man to clean his throat. I'll come get his head soon. The expressions of everyone here was quite off when they heard this. The sovereign of man. He was one of the leaders of the human race. Even in the large universe that was filled with experts, he was still someone who was ranked at the top. But Yang Yi wanted him to clean his throat and get ready to be killed. Arrogant. Absolutely arrogant. Those experts had extremely unsightly expressions on their faces when Yang Yi gazed at them. All of them were at the enlightened realm. Needless to say, they wanted to attack him, but they didn't dare to, because the yellow-robed man Yang Yi just killed was stronger than all of them. But Yang Yi had killed the yellow-robed man with a single attack. Just one attack. Meanwhile, Yang Yi suddenly roared with fury. Are you still not going to fuck off? They glanced at him, and then the man who led the group now suddenly said, Yang Yi, this is betrayal of the human race. Yang Yi suddenly laughed with ridicule. So refusing to let the sovereign of man kill me is betrayal of the human race. That fellow intended to say more, but Yang Yi suddenly said, Say another word and all four of you can stay here forever. That man stared at Yang Yi and said, Let's see how long you can stay so arrogant. He turned around with the intent to leave, but a ray of light flashed below Yang Yi's feet. An instant later, a wave of mysterious energy appeared here. The sword domain. Everyone's expressions changed when the sword domain enveloped them. At the same time, a ray of light flashed. Split second. The man's figure stiffened on the spot, and then a hole suddenly split open on his forehead. An instant later, blood sprayed out like a fountain, and the man's face was covered in blood. The atmosphere here instantly became heavy. Yang Yi had killed because of the slightest disagreement. Wuxia and the others' gazes had a trace of fear when they gazed at Yang Yi again. The remaining experts who were sent by the sovereign of man didn't dare to say another word, and they immediately turned around and left. Or to be more precise, they fled. Yang Yi's expression remained calm when he saw them flee, but he heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. Even though he looked very powerful, he wouldn't be able to deal with them if they ganged up on him. After all, he wasn't at the enlightened realm. Moreover, he hadn't forgotten the people around him. Even though Wuxia and the others were from the medium universe, their strength was much greater than enlightened realm experts. Once he was too exhausted, he couldn't guarantee that they wouldn't attack him, especially Xianxia. Meanwhile, Wuxia suddenly said, Everyone, even though we're in the large universe now, we aren't truly safe. All of them gazed at Wuxia. Wuxia said, This place is called the Barrier's Entrance, and it's an extremely remote place in the large universe. We'll only truly be within the large universe once we leave this place. At that time, we'll be truly safe. However, if I'm not wrong, the experts of those large organizations are waiting for us at the exit. Suddenly, Xianxia said, I understand what you mean. You hope that we join forces, right? Wuxia nodded. Trust me. We're not a match for them on our own. Xianxia chuckled. Of course we can, but I have a suggestion. Yang Yi can't come with us. Everyone gazed at Xianxia. Yang Yi glanced at Xianxia and didn't say a word. Meanwhile, Xianxia said, Everyone, I'm sure you're aware who Yang Yi has offended, the sovereign of man. Moreover, I'm sure all of you are aware that he hasn't just cultivated a devil cultivation technique. He has even cultivated the techniques of the human race's enemy, the shaman race. If we stay with him, we'll definitely suffer all sorts of trouble, and we may even become the enemies of the entire human race because of him. All of them fell silent when they heard Xianxia. Even though they didn't know why Xianxia kept targeting Yang Yi, they knew he was right. Yang Yi was strong, but he was too skilled at causing trouble. If he stayed with them, his problems might become their problems. especially the sovereign of man would definitely not spare Yang Yi. At that time, if they were with Yang Yi, they couldn't guarantee that the sovereign of man's rage wouldn't extend to them too. So, as soon as they thought up to this point, they had a decision. Meanwhile, Yang Yi suddenly stepped forward and smiled. I understand. Good luck. He turned around and intended to leave once he finished speaking. Suddenly, Guya flicked a scroll over to Yang Yi. It's the map of this place. Even though it isn't very complete, it should be helpful to you. Yang Yi didn't refuse. He took it and said, Thank you. He vanished into the distance once he finished speaking. Xianxia watched Yang Yi leave with a cold smile on his face. Suddenly, the woman in a red dress from Moment Mountain walked off towards the distance. Everyone gazed at her. Guya suddenly asked, You're leaving? She stopped, glanced at them and said, So what if we're devil cultivators or evil cultivators? Her figure turned ethereal, and then she was over 10,000 kilometers away. Suddenly, a voice resounded, She's an evil cultivator. All of them immediately came to an understanding. Guya withdrew his thoughts. Let's go. He immediately vanished on the spot once he finished speaking. Around 15 minutes after they left, the ground suddenly trembled, and then a figure floated out from there. Their quality is quite good. Hee. The shadow vanished without making another sound. Meanwhile, Yang Yi withdrew the map, glanced at it, and then put it away after he found the exit. After that, he vanished into the distance. The exit, just like Guya and the others, he had to leave this place as soon as possible. Otherwise, it was easy for him to be caught. It was around half a day's journey. Based on his current speed, it would take him half a day to get to the exit. Of course, it would take that long only if nothing unexpected occurred. An hour later, Yang Yi suddenly stopped. He glanced at the surroundings before tapping 2 fingers forward. A ray of light flashed. Bang! A point in space around 3 kilometers away trembled, and then an old man walked out from there. The old man sized up Yang Yi and smiled. Interesting. Yang Yi glanced at the old man and spoke indifferently. Do you need something? The old man smiled. Your natural talent isn't bad. I want to take you as my disciple. He paused for a moment and added, I forgot to tell you that I'm Gu Qiantang, an elder of the Immortal Wing Sect. The Immortal Wing Sect? Yang Yi frowned slightly. Never heard of it. The old man wasn't angered by this and said, The human race has 10 paradises. The Immortal Wing Sect is located on Immortal Wing Mountain, and it's one of those paradises. Young man, joining one of the 10 paradises is a dream that countless youths have. One of the 10 paradises. Yang Yi thought for a moment and replied, What sort of existence is the sovereign of man in the human race? The sovereign of man? The old man was slightly stunned, and then he said, The sovereign of man is the holy monarch who manages the human world, and the 10 paradises belong to the human world. Yang Yi asked, Do the 10 paradises obey the sovereign of man's orders? The old man thought for a moment and said, It depends on the situation. Normally, the 10 paradises don't obey the sovereign of man's orders. However, if we enter into battle with the shaman race, then the sovereign of man has the authority to gather all the powers and go to battle. Yang Yi suddenly asked, What happens if you don't obey his orders? The old man said, How can we not? If we disobey his orders, the human race would be in danger. All right, you'll find out about the large universe once you go back to the sect with me. Yang Yi glanced at the old man and said, I heard that once all of you take the people of the lower universes back with you, you erase their memories and take control of them, right? A wisp of surprise flashed through the old man's eyes. You know quite a bit. Yang Yi asked, Is it true? The old man explained, That was in the past. Now, besides a few evil sects and devil sects, very few powers do that. Yang Yi asked, Why? Potential problems. The old man continued. As those people gradually grew stronger, their memories recovered. Once they fully recovered their memories, it would be a problem. So, everyone changed our ways of doing things. We rope people over to our side now. Yang Yi nodded slightly. He thought for a moment and said, Senior, I appreciate your kindness. However, out of consideration for you and your sect, I think that it's best that I don't join." The old man was puzzled. "Why?" Xianxia replied, "I'm afraid you might cry when the time comes." The old man felt speechless. Xianxia didn't say another word. He just turned around and walked away. Suddenly, the old man appeared in front of Xianxia. He looked Xianxia in the eyes and asked, "You refuse?" Xianxia nodded. The old man spoke indifferently. "You looked not bad, so I wanted to take you as my disciple. But now it seems like you're really not sensible. Since that's the case, I don't mind using a different method." Xianxia asked, "Capture me? And then erase my memories?" The old man replied, "You chose this path." Suddenly, a ray of light flashed beneath Xianxia's feet, and then a wave of mysterious energy appeared here. The old man's expression changed drastically, and he was about to leave. However, a sword pressed against his forehead. Xianxia looked the old man in the eyes and said, "Answer a question of mine and I'll spare your life if your answer satisfied me." The old man stared at Xianxia while disbelief filled his eyes. Meanwhile, Xianxia pressed the sword a little harder against the old man's forehead and said, "Tell me, did the chicken or the egg come first? Did the chicken or the egg come first?" The old man hadn't expected Xianxia to ask this question. A moment later, he understood what Xianxia meant. His profound energy surged madly. Hiss! Suddenly, a sword pierced through his head, and then a bloody head flew up into the air. Xianxia glanced at the old man's corpse and waved his right hand. The old man's spatial ring flew into his grasp. He glanced at it. There were many things within it, but most of them were useless. Xianxia was about to withdraw his divine sense when a wisp of surprise suddenly flashed through his eyes. A moment later, a map appeared in his grasp. The map of the area. However, it was more complete than the map he already had. Xianxia opened the map, and the full barrier entrance appeared before him. Xianxia frowned as he scanned through it because he noticed that the exit labeled on Guya's map wasn't the exit at all. It was the entrance. It was a trap. Xianxia put the map away and looked off into the distance. He was looking in the direction of the so-called exit, the trap that those powers had laid for Guya and the others. Wait, Xianxia seemed to have thought of something, and then his face fell. The map. The map was given to him by Guya, so it meant that Guya wanted him to go to the entrance. Guya. Xianxia thought about everything that had occurred before this, and he noticed that Guya wasn't ordinary at all. Or it should be said that Guya was very mysterious. Guya had been to the upper universe, but he went back down and he knew a lot about what was happening up here. He even had the map. It was strange no matter how Xianxia thought about it. A short while later, Xianxia shook his head and stopped thinking about it. In any case, he wasn't with them. As for Xianxia and the others' fate, it didn't have anything to do with him. Or it should be said that he had to thank Xianxia. If it wasn't for Xianxia, he might have fallen into that trap with the others. Xianxia restrained his thoughts and continued forward. He passed through a huge mountain range and finally arrived at the true exit of barrier entrance. However, just as he expected, everything wasn't as straightforward and simple as he'd imagined. There was a woman in a red dress standing there. The woman in a red dress was the woman from Moment Mountain, and she was looking indifferently at him as she stood there. Xianxia asked, "Do you need something?" She pointed towards her right. "There'll be no place for you in the human race." Xianxia asked, "So?" She replied, "Join the Evil Alliance. We can protect you." The Evil Alliance? Xianxia was puzzled. "What's that?" She explained, "An alliance of evil cultivators. Even the sovereign of man is nothing to fear for us." Xianxia walked over to her and smiled. "Do I look like I fear the sovereign of man?" She looked him in the eyes and didn't say anything. Xianxia continued, "Sword cultivators have no fear in their hearts. Even if I'm no match for him, I've never feared the sovereign of man. If I die, then I die. But if I hold fear in my heart and seek the help of others, then I'll be cowering from him. I'd rather die than cower." As soon as he finished speaking, he passed her and vanished into the distance. The woman in a red dress fell silent. Meanwhile, a black shadow appeared not too far away from her. The shadow looked in the direction Yang Yi left towards and said, "How insensible! Let me go deal with him." The shadow intended to pursue Yang Yi after finishing. However, the woman in a red dress suddenly said, "Go if you want to die." The shadow stopped. "What do you mean?" She stretched out her hand and combed the hair by her ear, and then she spoke indifferently. "Just a little while ago, he instantly killed 2 enlightened realm experts." The black shadow was speechless. She glanced at the direction Yang Yi vanished towards and said, "Take me to the evil progenitor. Welcome to the large universe." Ho Qing's voice resounded in Yang Ye's mind. Yang Yi took a deep breath. At this moment he'd left the barrier entrance, and he was in the large universe. "Shao Qi, Zir, second sister." Yang Yi asked, "Senior, where's the sovereign of sky?" He wanted to go look for Shao Qi right away. Ho Qing replied, "You can't get there." Yang Yi was puzzled. "Why?" Ho Qing replied, "Looks like you don't know much about the large universe. Let me explain it to you. I'll skip the part about how huge the large universe is. You'll be able to experience it for yourself soon. There are all sorts of races in the large universe, like the human race, demon race, shaman race, devil race, sky race, spirit race. The places they live are called dimensions. For example, the human race lives in the human dimension." Yang Yi asked, "Shao Qi is from the sky race, right?" Ho Qing replied, "Yes. She's from the sky race in the sky dimension. You must pass through the barrier between the human dimension and sky dimension to get there. But that requires the sovereign of man's approval. Not only do you need his approval, you need the approval of the sky dimension. Otherwise, you'll be killed. Because the top-rate experts of the various races guard the barriers between dimensions. The sky dimension." Yang Yi fell silent. "I need the sovereign of man's approval to go to the sky dimension. Would the sovereign of man agree? Of course he wouldn't. So, that method of getting to the sky dimension would definitely not work." Ho Qing suddenly asked, "How about going to my shaman race?" "The shaman race?" Yang Yi asked, "What do you mean?" Ho Qing replied, "Return to the shaman race with me. I can help you get to the sky dimension from there." Yang Yi asked, "I don't need the sovereign of man's approval to go to the shaman dimension?" Ho Qing replied, "We can sneak over. I know how to sneak from into the human dimension from the shaman dimension, and I know how to sneak back. However, I don't know how to sneak into the sky dimension from the human dimension, the shaman dimension." Yang Yi didn't even hesitate, because the important matter at hand was to find Shao Qi as soon as possible. He really wanted to know how Zir was right now. Besides that, he wanted to revive Blood Maiden. Yang Yi asked, "How do I get to the shaman dimension?" Ho Qing replied, "Go to the border between the human dimension and shaman dimension, Broken Cliff Mountain." Yang Yi asked, "How do I get there?" Ho Qing replied, "I don't know." Yang Ye's face darkened. "What do you mean?" Ho Qing explained, "Kid, I teleported to a point in space, but you don't have that ability right now." Yang Yi shook his head, glanced at the surroundings, and vanished on the spot. Presently, he had to figure out the situation in the human dimension, because he knew nothing about it. A short while later, Yang Yi noticed an ancient city. The city wasn't very huge, or it should be said to be very small. It was like a village in the lower universe. Yang Yi descended before the village, and then he looked up at the city entrance built with mud. There were 3 black words there, Peach Garden Village. Village, not city. Suddenly, a little black ball flew off the wall, and it rolled over to Yang Ye's foot. Meanwhile, the entrance opened a little, and then a small head emerged from there. It was a young girl around the age of 8 or 9. She wore a linen dress, and she had a small pair of twin tails. She glanced timidly at Yang Yi while holding tight to the corners of her dress. Quite some time passed before she summoned the courage to speak timidly. Big brother, can you give it back to me?" Yang Yi gazed at her, and then he gazed at the ball by his foot. He shook his head and smiled. After that, he tapped it lightly with the tip of his foot, and it instantly rolled over to her. But the small ball wasn't the only thing which arrived before her. Yang Yi had appeared before her as well. Of course, Snowy was there with him. Xianxia rubbed her head and smiled. "Can I come in?" She was clearly quite nervous. Meanwhile, Snowy appeared before her. As soon as she saw Snowy, she blinked at Snowy, and there was undisguised fondness in her eyes. Snowy pointed at the small black ball near the little girl's feet, and then she started waving her claws. The little girl couldn't understand Snowy at all. Meanwhile, Xianxia said, "She's asking what that is." The young girl hesitated for a moment and spoke softly, "A ball. A ball you can kick." After that, she flicked it up lightly with the tip of her foot, and then she started bouncing it with her legs. She frequently performed all sorts of tricks, and it made Snowy's eyes open wide. Excitement. She gazed at Snowy and asked, "Do you want to play?" Snowy quickly nodded. She cracked a smile and passed the ball to Snowy. However, Snowy realized that her feet were too short. The young girl pointed at her head. "You can use this too." As she spoke, she placed the ball on her head and bounced it slightly. Snowy was absolutely overjoyed, and she hurriedly placed it on her head and bounced it up too. It didn't take long for the two little fellows to start playing together. She brought Xianxia into the village too. After he entered it, he noticed that the village was filled with ordinary people, and there wasn't a single cultivator. The young girl brought Xianxia and Snowy to her home. Only her grandfather lived there with her. He was an old man on the verge of death, and he was an ordinary person too. "You're not an ordinary person." These were the first words the old man spoke upon meeting Xianxia. Xianxia grinned. "I'm just passing by. I'll leave soon." The old man hesitated for a moment and asked, "Are you an immortal of legend?" Xianxia was puzzled. "An immortal?" The old man replied, "People capable of flying and overturning oceans." Xianxia rubbed his nose and said, "Sort of." The old man suddenly sighed softly and gazed at the young girl. "Her name is Xir. Her parents left 5 years ago. They said they went to cultivate, but we haven't heard from them for 5 years. As for her, she sits on the rock outside the village every evening." Xianxia glanced at the young girl and fell silent. Meanwhile, the old man added, "It's the first time she's so happy in so many years, and it's the first time I've seen her dare to speak to another." He suddenly stopped and glanced at Snowy, who acted like a person. He muttered to himself, "That little fellow can be considered as a person, right?" Xianxia was about to speak when his expression suddenly changed drastically. "Come back here." Snowy was still playing with Xir when she heard him. She shuddered, and then immediately flashed over to Xianxia's shoulder. Meanwhile, a gorgeous woman in a black dress suddenly appeared where Snowy had been. The woman's left hand grabbed Xir, who still hadn't reacted to what had just happened, and her right hand descended where Snowy had been a moment ago. She glanced at her right hand, and then she shrugged and gazed at Xianxia. She smiled. "Allow me to introduce myself. I'm a subordinate of the Sovereign of Man. I'm one of the 3 greats, the Cruel Lady." Xianxia looked her in the eye. "Let go of her." "Let go of her?" The woman was slightly stunned, and then she gazed at Xir, who seemed utterly struck by panic, and she smiled. "You care a lot about her?" A smile suddenly curled up on the corners of her mouth at this point, but it was quite savage. After that, she suddenly grabbed Xir's right arm and pulled. Hiss! Just like that, Xir's right arm was pulled off from her body. This sudden turn of events caused the surroundings to fall deathly silent. Snowy's eyes were opened wide and filled with disbelief. Obviously, she hadn't expected that to happen. Meanwhile, the old man hurriedly knelt down on the ground and kowtowed incessantly. "Immortal, she's just a child. Please spare her. I'll do anything you want to repay you." Xianxia stared at the woman with a calm expression on his face. But those who knew Xianxia knew that it was the moment he was the most terrifying. As for Xir, she fainted before she could even let out a shrill cry. Suddenly, the women grabbed Xir's other arm and gazed at Xianxia. She smiled. "Tisk tisk, it's truly difficult to believe. They say you're an extremely cruel fellow who kills decisively. But now it seems like you aren't as I imagined. I'm disappointed, truly disappointed." As soon as she finished speaking, she pulled again. Hiss! Xir's other arm was pulled off. Blood flowed from both her shoulders. The old man suddenly stood up and howled furiously at the woman. You have enmity with him, so seek vengeance from him. Why are you treating a little girl like that? Does bullying the weak bring you joy? Of course. She gazed at the old man and smiled. Why do we cultivate? It's to become strong. But why become strong? It's naturally so that we can do as we please. Old man, see? I can do as I please now, yet you can only watch. That's the difference between us. An ant will always be an ant and can only be trampled upon. She gazed at Xianxia and continued, Aren't I right? Meanwhile, Snowy suddenly leaped up into the air from Xianxia's shoulder. A golden sword had appeared in her grasp. No, to be more precise, there were 2 swords, one in each of her claws. At this moment, Snowy's face was covered in anger, extreme rage. It was the first time that Snowy had ever been so furious. What a cute little fellow. Meanwhile, the woman suddenly chuckled. It would definitely taste really good if it's stewed. No, it'll be better if it's braised. Braised Snowy. Snowy was furious. She grabbed the swords and was about to charge at the woman. But Xianxia stopped her. Snowy gazed at Xianxia, and then she passed the Sovereign of Man's sword to Xianxia while she kept the other. Obviously, she wanted Xianxia to attack with her. Even though she'd only known Jir for a short while, she had a very good impression of the little girl. Xianxia rubbed Snowy's head lightly, and then he gazed at the woman. You know, I always thought that the strong should have their own pride. To be honest, if you did as you pleased and tortured people who were stronger than you, then I would be convinced of it. However, just look at yourself. Besides torturing the weak, what else can you do? As far as I'm concerned, those who bully the weak but fear the strong are worse than dogs. She was about to speak when Xianxia suddenly spread open his arms. Come, torture me. I beg you to torture me. She chuckled and tossed Jir to the side, and then she started walking towards Xianxia. Looks like you're very confident. Suddenly, Xianxia vanished on the spot. He didn't attack her, and he appeared beside Jir instead. He took Jir in his arms and pressed his palm on her chest. A short while passed before he heaved a sigh of relief. Her vitality hadn't dispersed completely. She could still be saved. Xianxia placed her within the primordial pagoda, and Snowy gave up on killing the woman as well. She hurriedly went into the primordial pagoda and brought Jir to Ho Qing. She kept waving her little claws while a pleading expression filled her eyes. Ho Qing glanced at Snowy and muttered to himself, Does this little fellow think I can do anything? She keeps seeking my help for everything. Even though he'd muttered that to himself, he didn't dare delay. His gaze descended onto Jir, and then he shook his head upon seeing her. What a piece of trash! She caused such serious injuries to an ordinary person. Ho Qing was a powerful figure in the upper dimension too. Even though he was enemies with the human race, unless an ordinary person offended him, he wouldn't torture and kill the ordinary humans for no reason. Because it was just as Xianxia had mentioned earlier. Pride. The strong had their pride. Meanwhile, Snowy waved her claws incessantly. Ho Qing hurriedly said, all right, my little lord. I'll save her. I'll do it right now. In the outside world, the woman sized up Xianxia and said, So you said all of that just to save her? TSK. What a surprise. Xianxia ignored her and gazed at the old man. Don't worry. She's very safe. As soon as he finished speaking, he gazed at the woman again. Come! A ray of light shot up into the sky. He didn't choose to fight in the village because their battle would destroy it. A smile curled up on the corners of the woman's mouth, and then she vanished on the spot. The old man looked up at the sky. However, he couldn't see anything. He just looked at the sky and muttered, The weak can only be trampled upon. High above in the sky. As soon as Xianxia stopped, the woman appeared before him. She was about to speak when Xianxia suddenly turned around and swung his sword. Heavenrend. His heavenrend wasn't the same as it had been anymore. Carried obliterating force now. Bang! As soon as it descended, a huge explosion resounded, and then countless sparks and rays of light sprayed towards the surroundings. A breath of time later, The woman's voice suddenly resounded. Is that all you've got? Yang Yi looked ahead. A woman walked out from amidst the sparks and light, and it was the woman from before. Moreover, she was completely unharmed. Yang Ye's gaze paused momentarily on the red shoulder guards she wore. Those shoulder guards had defended her from his attack. Is that all you've got? She suddenly chuckled. To be honest, I'm very disappointed, extremely disappointed, because when I accepted this mission, I thought it would be fun. But I didn't expect you to be much weaker than I expected. It's so boring. Suddenly, Yang Yi took a step forward. The sword domain. Once he released the sword domain, his aura was completely different. An instant later, a ray of light flashed below his feet, and then he appeared in front of her while his sword and sword sheath had been switched for the Sovereign of Man's sword. The smile on the woman's face immediately froze when he swung his sword. It was the same attack, but its strength was completely different. She stopped underestimating Yang Yi, and her profound energy surged madly. At the same time, her shoulder guards suddenly emanated a fiery glow. However, because she'd been underestimating him, she was too close to him, so Yang Yi had been able to converge the full strength of his attack on her. Bang! An explosion resounded, and the woman was blasted away. Even the red shoulder guards were slashed into bits by Yang Ye's attack. Yang Yi didn't stop, of course. Once he blasted her flying, a ray of light flashed beneath his feet, and he transformed into a ray of light that shot forward. Her expression changed drastically when she saw him charge at her. She couldn't be bothered about the injuries she'd suffered, and she just circulated her profound energy while forming a strange seal with both hands. In an instant, the space around her started to tremble violently, and then numerous rays of fiery light sprayed out from the space around her. Flames! Yang Yi was about to use his sword to destroy them with force, but he suddenly thought of something. A moment later, a strand of flames swept out from Yang Yi. In an instant, Yang Yi was covered in flames, and then the woman watched with astonishment as her flames actually started to surge backwards and to the sides. It was instinctively afraid. Even though her flames were extraordinary, the gap between them and Yang Ye's divine inflame was too huge. So, as soon as they saw the divine inflame, all of them immediately retreated instinctively. Meanwhile, Yang Yi appeared in front of her, and then he swung his sword again. It was just a simple swing of the sword. It had no flashy moves or special technique. It was just a simple swing. Bang! An explosion resounded, and the woman was blasted away again. This time, blood constantly sprayed out of her mouth as she flew. Yang Yi was about to attack again when she suddenly turned around and stomped her foot against the ground, and then her figure shot up towards the sky. Flee! Her trump card was those flames. However, she'd noticed to her shock that Yang Ye's flames were much stronger than hers. So, she could be said to be completely countered by Yang Yi, and thus she'd decisively chosen to flee. But would Yang Yi let her escape? A ray of light flashed beneath Yang Ye's feet, and then he appeared in front of her before swinging his sword again. Bang! She was blasted away once more. At the same time, a mysterious wave of energy appeared here. The sword domain. Yang Yi had activated the sword domain again, and then a ray of light flashed. A moment later, a sword was pressed against the woman's forehead. She'd lost. She stared at him and was about to speak, but Yang Yi suddenly used his sword to slap her right cheek. Slap! A loud slap resounded, and a clear mark was left behind on her cheek. Meanwhile, Yang Yi said, "That isn't symmetrical." As he spoke, he slapped her left cheek with his sword. Slap! At this moment, there was a mark on each of her cheeks. She stared at him. "Yang Yi, you can kill me, but don't." Suddenly, Yang Yi grabbed her by the throat, and then they appeared on the ground below. A moment later, Yang Yi slammed her against the ground. Bang! The ground cracked open. However, she was completely fine. She was a powerful expert, so the ground was naturally not as hard as her head. But Yang Ye's actions were a huge humiliation for her. Her face warped as she stared at Yang Yi, and she was about to speak when Yang Yi stomped his foot on her face. After that, he slowly pressed down as he said, "Act as you please?" Didn't you say that you act as you please? Do you know what it's like now? As soon as he finished speaking, Yang Yi kicked her on the face. Bang! She was kicked around 3 kilometers away. Her figure hadn't even fallen to the ground when he appeared in front of her again, and then he stomped his foot down on her head. Yang Yi pressed lightly with his left foot and said, I plan to kill you in an instant, but doing that would be letting you off too easily. Yang Yi pointed his finger downwards, and a ray of sword energy entered her stomach. In an instant, her eyes opened wide. Her dantian had been shattered. Even though it wasn't difficult for her to form another dantian with the strength she possessed right now, it depended on whether Yang Yi was willing to let her go. Obviously, it was impossible. After he shattered her dantian, Yang Yi tapped a few times in succession, and 4 swords nailed her to the ground while he entered the primordial pagoda instead. In the primordial pagoda, Yang Yi went to Jir. At this moment, her condition was much better. Moreover, she was conscious. Besides Snowy, Schwer, Bauer, and Lei Lin were there too. All of them gazed at Yang Yi when they saw him. Snowy flew over to Yang Ye's shoulder, and then she pointed at Jir's shoulders. Her shoulders were empty. Yang Yi rubbed Snowy's head, and then he walked over to Jir. She glanced at Yang Yi and spoke timidly. Big brother, how's Grandpa? Yang Yi rubbed her head. He's fine. Jir visibly relaxed when she heard Yang Yi. She hesitated for a moment and spoke softly. Big brother, they said you can help me regrow my arms. Is that true? As she spoke, she gazed at Yang Yi with eyes filled with anticipation. Yang Yi smiled and placed his hands on her shoulders. Of course. As he spoke, he circulated countless strands of primordial violet energy into her, and it only took a short while for her arms to grow once more. Jir instantly cried tears of joy when she saw her new arms. Meanwhile, Snowy flew over to her, pointed at Yang Yi, and then started waving her claws. Snowy was saying, I didn't lie to you, huh? Jir cracked a smile as she gazed at Snowy. Thank you. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned to look at Ho Qing. She was clearly quite afraid because Ho Qing only had a head. She walked over to Ho Qing, knelt down and said, Grandpa, thank you for saving me. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned to face Yang Yi and continued, Big brother, you too. Yang Yi pulled her up and said, Don't kneel so easily. She grinned and didn't say anything. Come, let's go see someone. As soon as he finished speaking, he took her out of the primordial pagoda and brought her before the woman. Jir seemed very afraid when she saw the woman, and she immediately hid behind Yang Yi. Yang Yi smiled. It's fine. He flipped his palm and raised a sword in front of Jir. Kill her! Kill her! Jir was stunned. Yang Yi asked, Don't you want revenge? Jir glanced at her, and then she gazed at the sword in Yang Ye's grasp. A short while passed before she shook her head. Yang Yi asked, What? Jir spoke softly. Killing her is meaningless, because I'm still weak, and others will still be able to bully me as they please in the future. Yang Yi gazed at her for a short while and said, Smart girl. He naturally understood what she meant. Meanwhile, Jir suddenly knelt down and said, Please forgive me. She clearly had other intentions when she said that. Simply speaking, she'd played a little trick. Yang Yi shook his head and asked, You want to cultivate? Jir hesitated for a moment and nodded. Yang Yi asked, Why? She replied softly, If I'm as strong as you, I can go look for my parents. Yang Ye's slight frown immediately eased up when he heard this. He didn't like people who played tricks, but now that he heard her, he realized that she was still a child. She wanted to become stronger so that she could find her loved ones. Meanwhile, Ho Qing suddenly said, Nothing can be said about that reason. She has a kind heart, but she knows that the person she has encountered is able to change her fate, so she played a little trick. It's very normal. Yang Yi smiled. Senior, you have quite a good impression of her, huh? Ho Qing said, Her character is unlike yours. Haven't you noticed? There was no hatred in her eyes when she gazed at that woman. There are 2 types of people in this world who are quite terrifying. The first are people like you. People who are absolutely vengeful and go to extremes. Yang Ye's face darkened. What the hell? Meanwhile, Ho Qing continued. The other type is people like this little girl. The kind. Yang Yi asked. They're terrifying too? Of course. Ho Qing explained. Kid. Those who are truly kind will definitely be repaid with kindness and good luck. She's kind and without ill intent. And that's why your little lord became close with her and played with her. It's also why she encountered you even when in danger, was transformed by the primordial violet energy you possess, and we've even taken a liking to her. It's her karmic luck. Yang Yi had quite a strange expression on his face. If he was being honest, he really didn't think so much about it all. Meanwhile, Ho Qing added, Kid, let me ask you something. What would you have done if she took your sword and killed that woman? Yang Yi thought for a moment and replied, I'd find a place for her to live in and give her a life of wealth, and then I'd leave. Ho Qing asked, What about now? Yang Yi fell silent. Ho Qing said, Fate and karmic luck can't be seen or touched, but they exist. It was fate that brought you together, so help her. Yang Yi shook his head. I can't bring her around with me. Ho Qing replied, It's fine so long as you have the intent to help her. Yang Yi nodded, and then he gazed at Jir. He hesitated for a moment and asked, What should we do to that woman? He wanted to test her character. Jir glanced at the woman, hesitated for a moment and said, Ask her to apologize and we'll let her go. All right? Apologize. Yang Yi chuckled, and then he rubbed her head. No wonder Snowy was willing to play with you. However, we can't let her go. Otherwise, she'll go kill other people. Jir spoke softly. Big brother, you decide. Yang Yi walked over to the woman and said, Apologize and I'll let you die a quicker death. She stared at Yang Yi and remained silent. Yang Yi gave her a thumbs up. I love unyielding people. He sized her up. There was once a person whom I sliced into over 10,000 pieces. Just his head was sliced into over 1,000 slices. Even though I haven't done it for a long time, you don't have to worry. I won't make yours any lesser. As soon as he finished speaking, a sword appeared in his grasp. Yang Yi seemed to have thought of something at this point, and he sent Jir into the primordial pagoda. Meanwhile, in the world outside, Yang Yi waved his hand incessantly while piece after piece of flesh flew into the air. All of the flesh naturally belonged to that woman. However, she seemed to be very unyielding and didn't make a sound. It didn't take long for her to become completely unrecognizable. Only her soul was left, but even her soul wasn't able to escape. Her soul gazed at her and said, What else can you do? Feel free to try. Yang Yi smiled. Don't worry. It's only the beginning. He snapped his finger and a flame appeared on his thumb. The divine inflame. As soon as it appeared, the temperature here became blazing hot. She immediately revealed fear in her eyes when she saw the divine inflame. What are you planning? Yang Yi grinned. Nothing much. As soon as he finished speaking, he flicked the flame forward, and it enveloped the woman. A shrill and miserable cry resounded. It was clearly painful to be burned by the divine inflame. It only took a while for a weak voice to resound. I'll apologize. She wanted to apologize. Yang Yi glanced at her and said, No, let's speak about that a little later. Yang Yi, she howled. Yang Yi closed his eyes. At this moment, he'd realized something. He finally knew why the sovereign of man and the others wanted to kill him. The strong. As far as the sovereign of man and the others were concerned, they were strong, and he was just from the lower universe. He was a weakling, an ant. At most times, the strong didn't need a reason to ill-treat the weak. If one insisted on a reason, it may be because it made them happy, or they couldn't stand the sight of the person. Since the ancient times, the strong did as they pleased, and the weak were resigned to their fate. It was an eternal truth. Quite some time passed before Yang Yi opened his eyes. He looked up at the sky and said, The winds of spring blow, the drums of war rumble. But when have I, Yang Yi, ever feared any more? A short while later, her soul vanished completely. She'd been tortured to death. Yang Yi didn't let her apologize and just tortured her to death. Normally, he wouldn't do that because he wasn't fond of torturing people. However, he felt that even letting her die was letting her off easily. Yang Yi restrained his thoughts, and then he brought Jir to her grandfather. Yang Yi rubbed her head and gazed at the old man. "I want to take her with me and help her." The old man immediately knelt down when he heard Yang Yi. Thank you, Immortal. Thank you." He would naturally not stop the old man, because he knew very well what his actions meant. It meant that Jir's fate would be changed. Fortune and luck. It was Jir's fortune and luck. Meanwhile, a gust of wind pushed the old man up, and Yang Yi said, "You said that her parents went to Cultivate. Do you know where?" The old man replied, "I think it's a place called Floating Mountain." Yang Yi asked, "They abandoned their daughter to Cultivate?" Jir lowered her head slightly when she heard Yang Yi. The old man laughed bitterly. "An immortal passed by one day and saw them. That immortal said their physique isn't bad and wanted to guide them onto the path of cultivation. They knew it was a once-in-a-lifetime chance. So they agreed. However, Jir was still young, and they couldn't take her with them. Even that immortal refused. So, Yang Yi gazed at the young girl, rubbed her head and said, "Fate brought us together. I'll take you to see them." As far as he was concerned, it merely took a few days. Besides, because of his fondness for her, he was helping her for another reason, and it was because he was the reason she'd suffered earlier. Besides fondness, there was a trace of guilt. Yang Yi flicked 10 energy pearls to the old man. "It can lengthen your lifespan. Take care." The old man glanced at the energy pearls and gazed at the young girl. The young girl spoke softly, "Grandpa, I'll come back. Wait for me." The old man grinned. "All right, I'll wait for you." Yang Yi nodded, and then he took her hand and vanished into the sky. The old man looked up at the ray of light in the sky with a slightly blank gaze. "Grandpa probably won't be able to wait until you return." Once they left the village, Yang Yi flew almost 2 hours before he finally arrived at a real city. After entering the city and asking around, Yang Yi finally found out where Floating Mountain was. He didn't stay a while longer in the city and left for Floating Mountain. Yang Yi had thought it would take just a few hours to get there, but he was wrong. The human dimension's size truly surpassed his expectations. He'd flown for almost an entire day and night before he finally arrived there. Floating Mountain, it was one of the 10 paradises of the human dimension. It wasn't just a single mountain but 36 mountains, and all of them floated in the sky. Clouds and mist coiled around the top of the mountains, and mysterious white cranes flew by from time to time. It was truly like a mountain residence of immortals. The Floating Sect. The Floating Sect resided on Floating Mountain. Yang Yi didn't just fly straight into the sect. He wasn't an idiot. If he did that, it would definitely cause endless trouble for him. Most importantly, he didn't have the strength to fight the entire sect on his own. The Floating Sect couldn't be compared to those powers of the lower universe. It was a true titan, and even the sovereign of man had to be careful when dealing with one of the 10 paradises. There was a city below the mountains, and it was called Floating City. Even though the Floating Sect stood high above the masses, it couldn't fully separate itself from the world of mortals. Because their disciples were selected from the mortal world, and Floating City was a station between the Floating Sect and the mortal world. Besides that, everyone who came to visit Floating Sect would first find a place to stay in Floating City. There was a path in Floating City, and below Floating Mountain, it was called the Floating Path. It was a test. Anyone who could pass through it would be allowed to join the Floating Sect and become an outer court disciple. There was nothing special about the Floating Path. At the very least, it looked very ordinary. Yang Yi couldn't help but feel slightly conflicted as he gazed at the Floating Path. Do I really have to go through this path? How will I go to Floating Mountain if I don't? Yang Yi had planned to sneak in, but Ho Qing had stopped him, because besides an array of powerful and mysterious grand formations, it had extraordinary experts too. Yang Yi hesitated for a moment and decided to use the test as his way into Floating Mountain. He was only here to find Jir's parents. He wasn't here to cause trouble. So, sneaking in wasn't necessary. You're going to try the floating path? Suddenly, a clear and melodious voice came from Xianxia's right. Xianxia turned to look, and he saw a man in green clothes. The man was simply too beautiful. He had red lips, white teeth, willow leaf-shaped brows, large eyes, and an extremely slender figure. It could be said that even women would feel inferior before him. Xianxia glanced at the man and immediately realized that it wasn't a man at all. It was a woman dressed as a man. Moreover, the woman was clearly not trying to conceal it. Xianxia withdrew his gaze and nodded. The woman grinned. "Brother, do you know what the floating path is for?" Xianxia shook his head. She said, "The floating path was created by the floating sect's master many years ago, and it's naturally here to help the floating sect select extraordinary geniuses. Actually, the floating sect isn't the only one. All the other paradises have similar tests." Xianxia turned to look at her. "What are you trying to say?" She suddenly withdrew a folding fan and fanned herself lightly while smiling silently. Xianxia felt speechless. Suddenly, Xianxia turned to the side, and an old man in a blue robe had suddenly appeared before them. The old man was very strong. Xianxia's expression became quite solemn. The feeling the old man gave him was like the feeling Hao Tian gave him. Unfathomable. Ho Qing hadn't lied to him. The floating sect wasn't ordinary at all. The old man ignored Xianxia and gazed at the woman instead. "If I'm not wrong, you're the one who has gone through 9 paradises. Nanxiyin, right?" She grinned. "I am." The old man pondered deeply for a moment and said, "You're here to get through my sect's floating path?" She pointed at the floating path before her and said, "It's the last one." The old man said, "While it's a little rude, I have to ask, why are you doing this? Is it because you're trying to prove your natural talent to the world?" "Not at all." Nanxiyin grinned. "I don't have to prove anything to anyone. I'm only doing this because I made a bet with a friend. My friend said that if I'm able to get through the trials of all 10 paradises and break the records there, then she'll be my maidservant for 3 years. Conversely, I'll be her maidservant for 3 years. Now, I'm just one trial away from that." The old man glanced at her and asked, "Who are you?" "I can't say." Nanxiyin grinned. "You won't stop me, right?" The old man asked, "What if I do?" Nanxiyin grinned and withdrew a piece of jade. The old man's expression changed drastically when he saw it. He took a deep and long glance at her and said, "So you're from there?" Nanxiyin shrugged. "Can I start now?" The old man nodded. "Yes." Nanxiyin was about to step foot on the floating path when she suddenly seemed to have thought of something, and she asked, "What's the best record?" The old man replied, 27 breaths. 27. Nanxiyin glanced at the path. It wasn't very long and just stretched forward for 3 kilometers. It looked like a normal path. So, if one moved at an ordinary speed, it would take around 100 breaths of time at most. However, it was difficult to maintain one's speed on that path. Suddenly, she smiled. 20 breaths of time are enough." The old man's eyelids twitched. He glanced at her and remained silent. Meanwhile, she gazed at Xianxia. "Young man, are you sure that you want to watch?" Xianxia gazed at her with a puzzled expression in his eyes. She smiled. "It's nothing. I'm just afraid that it'll be a blow to your confidence." A strange expression appeared on Xianxia's face. Meanwhile, the old man suddenly said, "That young brother isn't ordinary." "I know." Nanxiyin smiled. "I wouldn't have wasted my breath on him if he wasn't." She paused for a moment and continued, "Brother, how about we play a game? It'll be really fun." Xianxia hadn't even spoken when she added, "I'll let you start first for 20 breaths of time, and then I'll start after you. If I win, I want something from you." "You want something?" Xianxia frowned slightly. "What?" Nanxiyin pointed at the sword in Xianxia's grasp. "It his sword." After he arrived at the large universe, Xianxia would naturally not let his guard down, so his sword was always in his grasp. However, he wasn't using the sword precursor because it was being nurtured in his sea of consciousness, so it couldn't fight with him for now. It wasn't the sword precursor, and it wasn't the sovereign of man's holy sword. After all, using that sword would cause a lot of trouble for him. He was using the unfettered one's sword. Even though he wasn't its owner, he could still use it. The sword acted quite sensibly and cooperated as well. Yang Yi moved his gaze away and gazed at her. What if you lose? What if I lose? She was slightly stunned, and then she smiled. Is that even possible? Yang Yi replied. What if? Nancy smiled. What do you want? Yang Yi thought for a moment and replied. I need a maidservant too. Be my maidservant if I lose. All right. The old man's expression changed when he heard Yang Yi. And then he glanced at Yang Yi and shook his head while speaking to himself. He's courting death. Nancy Yin's eyes opened wide, and she looked at Yang Yi for quite some time before she roared with laughter. Good. Very good. Your maidservant. Very good indeed. It's decided then. I'll be your maidservant. It's a promise. Come, go on. I'll give you 20 breaths of time before I start. Meanwhile, Yang Yi walked over to her and spoke seriously. I'm very strong, but I never proclaim it. Watch. I'll teach you how to act properly. As soon as he finished speaking, he stepped onto the floating path. The floating path was a difficult one. The floating sect had created it, so it was clearly not that easy to pass through. It tested a person's mentality, will, and courage. As soon as Yang Yi stepped foot onto the path, the scene before his eyes instantly changed. An illusion. However, such illusions were useless against Yang Yi. His mentality, will, and courage were extraordinary. Moreover, he was a sword cultivator who possessed the enlightened sword heart. So, Nancy and the old man were stunned by the scene which followed. Yang Yi shot through it swiftly. It didn't even take him 9 breaths of time to reach the end. Silence. Deathly silence. Meanwhile, Yang Yi returned to them, and he gazed at Nancy. Sorry, I accidentally went too fast. Right, go on. It's your turn. Nancy clenched her right fist and stared at Yang Yi, as if she wanted to see through him. Yang Yi walked over to her and smiled. What? You're going to choose to be my maidservant? Looks like I misjudged you. Suddenly, the old man said, May I know why you've come to my sect? Yang Yi turned to look at the old man and smiled. I'm here to see 2 people. The old man asked, You're looking for someone? Yang Yi nodded and said, Zhao Ling and Jiang Sheng. Those were the names of Zhi's parents. The old man asked, May I know why you're looking for them? Yang Yi smiled. Don't worry. I'm not here to look for trouble with them. I want to meet them for certain reasons. I wonder if you can help me tell them to come meet me? The old man glanced at Yang Yi, thought for a moment, and then nodded. Wait a moment. I'll get someone to check. I'll tell them to come meet you if they are in my sect. Yang Yi cupped his fist. Thank you. The old man nodded slightly and didn't say a word. Meanwhile, Yang Yi gazed at Nancy. So, can I take this as an admission of defeat? Nancy stared at Yang Yi for a long time before she suddenly cracked a smile. I didn't expect myself to misjudge someone. 9 breaths of time. I can't accomplish that indeed. But do you really want me to be your maidservant? Yang Yi asked. What? Nancy smiled. It's nothing. I'm just afraid you'll be found dead on the side of a road. Yang Yi's face gradually fell. The threat. Yang Yi shook his head and smiled. What? Can't accept your defeat? So you're trying to threaten me? Nancy shook her head. It's not a threat. I'm just stating a fact. Meanwhile, the old man suddenly said, She isn't lying. If you make her your maidservant, I'm afraid you'll really be killed. It's just a friendly warning, and I don't have any other intentions. Nancy grinned and remained silent. Meanwhile, Yang Yi looked her in the eyes and said, I was actually just joking, and I had no intention to make you my maidservant. But now I've changed my mind. I want you to be my maidservant. The smile on her face froze. Are you sure? Yang Yi smiled. I am. Of course, I can't do anything if you plan to go back on your promise. After all, I can't force you. She gazed at him for a long time and said, All right, I'll be your maidservant. But trust me, you won't even survive until tomorrow without begging me to take back what I said. Yang Yi smiled. Then let's just wait and see. She chuckled and withdrew a rock that flickered with green light, and then she spoke softly to it. Someone has made me his maidservant. I'm on Floating Mountain. A breath of time later, a voice came from the rock. I'll be there in 4 hours. Nancy put the rock away and gazed at Yang Yi. 4 hours. You may be able to escape if you flee now. Yang Yi suddenly said, I'm thirsty. I want some tea. Nancy Yin's eyes narrowed slightly, while the intent to kill flickered within them. Meanwhile, Yang Yi smiled. What? Can't accept your defeat. Nancy Yin gazed at him for a long time, and then she cracked a smile. Of course not. She vanished on the spot once she finished speaking. 2 breaths of time later, a cup of tea appeared before Yang Yi. However, Yang Yi ignored the tea and gazed at the old man. A middle-aged man had appeared beside the old man. The middle-aged man bowed slightly to the old man. Elder, they're not in the sect for now. However, I've given the order for them to return as soon as possible. The old man gazed at Yang Yi, and Yang Yi grinned. I can wait. The old man said, You really don't seem like you're here to look for trouble with them. Yang Yi replied, Of course not. The old man nodded and fell silent. Around 10 minutes later, 2 rays of light appeared in the sky, and they descended here. The light dispersed to reveal a young man and woman. They seemed to be around Yang Ye's age. They bowed to the middle-aged man beside the old man, and the man said, Manager Mo, may I know why you're looking for us? The middle-aged man gazed at the old man, and the old man gazed at Yang Yi. Yang Yi walked over to them and asked, Do you have a daughter called Jir? A wisp of astonishment flashed through their eyes when they heard Yang Yi, and the man asked, How do you know? Yang Yi waved his hand and the young girl appeared here. She glanced at the man and woman, and she was slightly timid. They gazed at Jir as well, and the man sized her up before saying, You your Jir? She nodded lightly in response. The man said, You've grown so big. She glanced at the man and woman, and she hesitated to speak. Meanwhile, Yang Yi suddenly asked, She's your daughter? The man and woman exchanged glances. In the end, the man hesitated for a moment and replied, Sort of. Yang Yi frowned. What do you mean? The man glanced at Yang Yi. May I know who you are? Yang Yi's face fell. Answer me. At this moment he was quite unhappy. He naturally didn't have a good impression of the man and woman who'd abandoned their children, and the way they acted right now made him even more displeased. The young man was clearly someone with a temper, so his face fell when Yang Yi responded like that. This is the Floating Sect's territory, and I'm a core inner court disciple of the Floating Sect. You... Suddenly, the old man's expression changed drastically. He tapped his finger forward, and a ray of cold light flashed. The surroundings suddenly fell silent. Meanwhile, a sword was pressed against the young man's forehead. Everyone gazed at Yang Yi, especially the old man. For the very first time, there was a solemn expression in his eyes, because he'd actually failed to stop Yang Yi's attack. It didn't mean he was weaker than Yang Yi, but Yang Yi had been faster. As for the young man and woman, they were utterly stunned, especially the young man. He hadn't expected that the man before him, who seemed to be around his age, actually possessed such terrifying strength. The woman by Yang Yi's side glanced at him with a trace of surprise in her eyes. Obviously, she was quite surprised by his strength. However, she was only surprised. She'd seen too many experts in her life. Meanwhile, the old man suddenly said, You really concealed your strength well. However, you seem to have forgotten that this is the Floating Sect. Are you here to show off in my sect? Yang Yi curled up his finger slightly, and the sword against the young man's forehead instantly vanished. Yang Yi gazed at the old man. Sorry, I'm a little rash. Since the old man was helping him, he naturally wouldn't overstep. The old man glanced at Yang Yi. Don't do it again. He gazed at the young man and continued, Answer all his questions. The young man hurriedly bowed. Understood. The young man immediately gazed at Yang Yi. This time, he had quite a respectful expression on his face. Actually, She isn't our own flesh and blood. Zhi's figure stiffened when she heard this, and her eyes were filled with disbelief. Yang Yi frowned as well. He hadn't expected that to be the truth, because the young man didn't seem like he was lying. Meanwhile, the young man continued. It was in the winter. I remember it very well. I heard a loud noise and went out to have a look, and there was a baby in front of me. He withdrew a palm-sized jade pendant. It was ink black, and there was an extremely fierce beast on it. Yang Ye's frown deepened when he saw the beast. For some reason, it made his heart palpitate slightly. The young man continued. She had it with her, and it should be related to her birth. As soon as he finished speaking, he flicked it over to Yang Yi. Yang Yi took it and transported it into the primordial pagoda. However, his expression changed drastically just a moment later. Because the jade pendant had returned to his grasp, the primordial pagoda refused to let it in. Yang Yi gazed at the jade pendant. What is this? The primordial pagoda actually refused to let it enter? Yang Yi was filled with questions. Meanwhile, Zhi suddenly kneeled before the man and woman. No matter what, thank you for saving my life. The man glanced at her, and there was a trace of complicated emotions in his eyes. Zhi stood up and gazed at Yang Yi. He grinned and said, It's fine. We'll search slowly until we succeed. It's my promise to you. All right? She smiled slightly. Thank you, big brother. Yang Yi sent her into the primordial pagoda. As for the jade pendant, he put it away. After that, he gazed at the old man. He was about to speak when a terrifying aura descended from the sky. Meanwhile, Nanciyin suddenly unfolded her fan, fanned herself lightly, and smiled in Yang Ye's direction. Beg me! You'll beg me! The woman's face was covered in a smile. A confident smile. A smile that felt like she had everything under her control. For some reason, it absolutely displeased Yang Yi. Since he was displeased, he discarded his decision to make a compromise and put an end to future troubles. Everyone watched as the aura arrived before them, and it was accompanied by a young man. The young man seemed to be around the age of 27 or 28. He wore an embroidered robe, had sharp brows, large eyes, and seemed very handsome. Of course, he was extremely strong too. He was at the enlightened realm at such a young age, and his aura was deep like an ocean. It was extremely heavy to others. The man's gaze immediately fell onto Nanciyin. At this moment, his expression became gentle, and there even was a slight smile on his face. Scene, you should have told me that you were coming here. She frowned slightly. Gong Jin, what are you doing here? Oh, it's obvious that carefree brother of mine told you, so that you can come rescue the beauty, right? The man was rather embarrassed. He smiled with embarrassment, and then he gazed at Yang Yi. While he was still smiling when he gazed at Yang Yi, it wasn't the same smile anymore. It was a ridiculing one. The man called Gong Jin smiled. You're the one who wants her to be his maidservant? Yang Yi ignored the man and gazed at Nanciyin. What? Nanciyin shrugged and interrupted Yang Yi. I'm not going back on my word. I'm still your maidservant. Of course, if you die or something happens to you, then it's not my fault, right? You... Suddenly, Yang Yi vanished on the spot, and he was in front of Nanciyin when he appeared again. Her expression changed drastically, and she clawed at him. However, Yang Yi was even faster, and his hand instantly wrapped around her throat. There was a golden spear behind Yang Yi, and it was just a few centimeters away from Yang Ye's back. The man in embroidered clothes was behind the spear. He'd attacked as soon as Yang Yi had. However, he'd been slightly slower. Yang Yi ignored the man, and he squeezed down slightly and lifted her up. I don't like being interrupted. Understand. She stared at him and remained silent. Suddenly, Yang Yi squeezed down further, causing her face to turn purple. How dare you? Suddenly, Gong Jin roared angrily. Do you know who she is? If you dare to harm a single hair on her, everyone related to you will be annihilated. Yang Yi suddenly gazed at Gong Jin. I'm so afraid. As soon as he finished speaking, he raised Nanciyin even higher up. Gong Jin's face grew terrifyingly gloomy, but he didn't dare to do anything. Yang Yi gazed at Nancy. Did you understand what I just said? She still gazed silently at Yang Yi. Meanwhile, Yang Yi tightened his grip. Nancy instantly felt suffocated. A trace of panic flashed through Gong Jin's eyes at this point. He knew that if she died here, it would be a serious problem, and even he would probably have to suffer. The old man frowned as well, because if she died, even the floating sect would be in quite a bit of trouble. He hesitated for a moment and said, "Young brother, don't be rash. There's no irreconcilable enmity between you, so it really isn't necessary to go this far." Yang Yi smiled. "Senior, you're right. It was a small matter. Unfortunately, I hate it when people act all high and mighty. They think their status is special, so they can bully and look down on everyone else." He gazed at Nancy and continued, "I'll ask you one last time. Did you hear me or not? If you didn't, then trust me, your head is going to get separated from your body." He hadn't intended to get entangled with her, but she didn't just take a yard when given an inch, she even threatened him. That infuriated Yang Yi. Face was something that was given mutually. If you give me some, I will give you some too. If you don't give me any, then why would I give you any? Nancy stared at Yang Yi. At this moment, she knew that the man before her wasn't lying, and he really did dare to kill her. He dared to kill her. She had no proof, and it was just a feeling. Meanwhile, Yang Ye's eyes narrowed slightly, and his grip grew even tighter. Nancy suddenly said, "I did. I heard you." Gong Jin and the old man seemed visibly relieved when they witnessed this. They were afraid Nancy would resist until the end and the situation would go out of hand. Yang Yi released her and slapped her lightly on the face. "Remember that since you're a maidservant, you should act like one." Suddenly, a speck of golden light appeared behind Yang Yi. Gong Jin had attacked. However, Yang Yi vanished on the spot, and he was behind Gong Jin when he appeared again. After that, a sword descended upon Gong Jin. Gong Jin's expression changed. However, his reaction wasn't slow at all. He turned around and raised his spear. At the same time, he clenched his left fist and was ready to attack once he stopped Yang Ye's attack. However, bang! Gong Jin was blasted over 10 kilometers away. Nancy gazed at Yang Yi with disbelief. She hadn't expected Yang Yi to repel Gong Jin with such ease. There was a trace of surprise in the old man's eyes as well because Yang Ye's strength far exceeded their expectations. Gong Jin glanced at his spear. It had cracked open, and even his hand had cracked open. He suppressed the shock in his heart and looked up at Yang Yi. "Who are you?" Yang Yi ignored Gong Jin. He turned to look at the old man from the floating sect. "Senior, thank you for your help. I have other matters to attend to, so I'll be taking my leave." The old man glanced at Yang Yi. "Farewell." Yang Yi nodded slightly, and then he gazed at Zhi's foster parents. He hesitated for a moment and said, "Your good deed should be repaid with kindness." He flicked a spatial ring to them. He'd gotten that from one of the people he'd killed. He didn't need the treasures within it, but they were definitely great treasures for the young man and woman. The young man cupped his fist to Yang Yi while a trace of excitement could be seen in his eyes. "Thank you." Yang Yi nodded, and then he gazed at Nancy. "You're free now." He vanished into the sky once he finished speaking. Nancy fell silent for a moment, and then she suddenly looked up in the direction Yang Yi had vanished towards. "You think you can just escape? No way." As soon as she finished speaking, a ray of multicolored light appeared below her feet, and then a rainbow appeared in the sky. "Seeing." Gong Jin was shocked and intended to chase after her. However, the old man suddenly said, "If you want to save her, it's best if you notify her family." Gong Jin gazed at the old man, and the latter added, "Since he possesses such strength and courage at his age, he's definitely not ordinary. Not only will chasing after them change nothing, it might infuriate him and make him kill you." Gong Jin's expression changed. In the end, he didn't chase after them and withdrew a rock instead. The old man withdrew his gaze and looked at Zhi's foster parents. "From now on, you're not inner court disciples anymore." Both of them were shocked. Meanwhile, the old man added, "From now on, you're elite disciples." They were stunned for a moment, and then wild joy filled their hearts. Xianxia shot swiftly through the sky on his sword. Suddenly he stopped and turned around. Nanxiyin was behind him. Xianxia glanced at her. "What?" Nanxiyin smiled. "Don't forget that I'm your maidservant." Xianxia asked, "You're that desperate to die?" Nanxiyin walked over to him. "People should always keep their word. Since I, Nanxiyin, dared to make that bet with you, I'll naturally keep my promise. So, I'm your maidservant from now on." Xianxia suddenly asked, "Where's Broken Cliff Mountain?" At this moment, he recalled that he didn't know where it was. Broken Cliff Mountain. Nanxiyin was slightly stunned, and then her eyes lit up. "You're going to the shaman dimension?" Xianxia frowned. "Mind your own business." Nanxiyin smiled. "Fine, but you're going to Broken Cliff Mountain, right? I just happen to be going there too. Let's go together. I can lead the way." Xianxia naturally didn't want to let her come with him, because her background wasn't ordinary at all. If she stayed with him, his troubles would be endless. While he didn't fear it, he didn't want more trouble to come looking for him. The important matter at hand for him was to go to the sky dimension. Suddenly, Nanxiyin added, "In order to get to Broken Cliff Mountain, you must pass through one of the 4 prefectures in the human dimension, the Northern Sky Prefecture, but it's guarded by extraordinarily strong experts. Normal people aren't able to get there at all. But I can." Xianxia was about to speak when Ho Qing's voice suddenly resounded in his mind. She's not wrong. Northern Sky Prefecture is guarded by the Northern Sky King. No one can enter Broken Cliff Mountain without the Sovereign of Man's approval. I snuck over, but your current strength is utterly incapable of accomplishing that. Xianxia fell silent for a while, and then he gazed at Nanxiyin. "You really can?" Nanxiyin smiled. "Of course." Xianxia nodded. "Then I'll go with you. Right? It's best if you don't tell your clansmen to come for you." She smiled. "Why?" "You're afraid." Xianxia glanced at her and spoke indifferently. I'm afraid I might kill them by accident." Nanxiyin sized up Xianxia and asked, "Who are you?" Xianxia didn't answer her. He just closed his eyes and immersed his consciousness into the primordial pagoda. Xianxia asked, "Senior, do you recognize the beast on that jade pendant?" The primordial pagoda had refused to let it come in, and it made Xianxia extremely puzzled. It was very strange, extremely even. Ho Qing shook his head and gazed at Xianxia. Xianxia gazed at Xianxia as well. Xianxia was from the demon race, and the beast on the jade pendant was clearly a demon beast. Even if it wasn't, it was definitely related to demon beasts. Xianxia fell silent for a long time before he asked, "It was with that little girl?" Xianxia nodded. Xianxia spoke solemnly. "If I'm not wrong, it should be a very ferocious demon beast from the ancient times, the royal crocodile." "The royal crocodile?" Xianxia and Ho Qing exchanged glances, and then they gazed at Xianxia. Xianxia spoke solemnly. "The royal crocodile was born during the ancient times, and it fed on dragons and phoenixes. It was born ferocious and violent. Besides a few demon beasts, no other demon beast from the ancient times dared to offend it. However, for some reason, the royal crocodiles started to gradually vanish. Now, they fed on dragons and phoenixes." Xianxia's eyelids couldn't help but twitch when he heard this. That was amazing. Moreover, based on how Xianxia looked, he was clearly quite afraid of the royal crocodiles. So what was Zhir's identity? Xianxia didn't linger on the question. The important matter at hand for him was to go to Broken Cliff Mountain. In the world outside, Xianxia opened his eyes and gazed at Nanxiyin. "Let's go!" A ray of light flashed beneath his feet, and he transformed into a ray of light that vanished into the sky. Nanxiyin fell silent for a short while, and suddenly chuckled. "Mysterious, truly mysterious. However, that makes it interesting." A multicolored glow appeared below her feet, and then a dazzling rainbow appeared in the horizon, while Nanxiyin had vanished. As he shot forward swiftly on his sword, Xianxia gained a rough understanding of the human dimension from Nanxiyin. The human dimension was divided into 5 prefectures: the Southern Unicorn Prefecture, the Northern Sky Prefecture, the Eastern Abyss Prefecture, Western Coral Prefecture, and Central Prefecture. The 5 prefectures were guarded by 5 supreme experts of the human race, and the sovereign of man was guarding the Central Prefecture and possessed authority over the entire dimension. Besides the 5 prefectures, there were 3 hallowed grounds and 10 paradises. The 3 hallowed grounds had the highest status, because even the sovereign of man couldn't order them around. At this moment, Xianxia had an understanding of the forces under the sovereign of man's disposal. It was a colossus, a true colossus. The sovereign of man's strength was definitely at the peak of the human dimension. Besides that, he had countless experts under his command like the 4 kings of the other 4 prefectures. They were peerless experts too. At this moment, Xianxia understood why the sovereign of man didn't come personally. He was just that confident. This time, Xianxia and Nancy Yin's destination was the Northern Sky Prefecture. Its strength was merely inferior to the Central Prefecture because it was the entrance to the human dimension, and a powerful enemy of the human race, the shaman race, was just beyond it. As for where they were right now, it was the Southern Unicorn Prefecture. Based on what Nancy Yin told him, it would take them at least 2 weeks to get there at their current speed. 2 weeks. How fast was he right now? Traveling 5,000 kilometers in an instant wasn't a problem at all. However, it would still take him 2 weeks to get to the Northern Sky Prefecture, so it showed how huge the world was. Stop flying. Suddenly, Nancy Yin spoke abruptly. Xianxia turned to look at her, and she pointed down. See that? There's a city down there, and it definitely sells flying transports. We can get one. Otherwise, we'll get tired to death if we keep flying like this. Xianxia thought for a moment and nodded. Even though he had sufficient energy pearls, he didn't want to exhaust himself like that. After all, it wasn't for just a day or 2. It was for 2 weeks. If they had a flying transport to carry them all the way, he could enter the primordial pagoda and cultivate. They descended to the ground. Xianxia looked up and saw 3 large golden words above the city gates. Blue Mist City. The city wasn't very big, but it was very old. Nancy Yin said, "Let's go." Xianxia glanced at her. He couldn't figure out what she actually wanted, because up until now, no one had come looking for trouble with them. Obviously, she had definitely done something, and that was why. So, why was she following him? Was she really just curious about him? Or because she thought it was fun? Xianxia shook his head and stopped thinking about it. He followed her into the city. Xianxia sized up the surroundings with a curious gaze. Actually, there wasn't a huge difference between the upper and lower universes. It was the people, the same sky, the same ground. If one insisted on pointing out something different, then it was obviously that the people here were much stronger. Because since he entered the city, the weakest amongst the cultivators Xianxia saw was at the Exalt realm, and even a child around the age of 10 was at the Exalt realm. They started at quite a high level of cultivation. Suddenly, Nancy Yin's voice resounded, "Hurry up!" Xianxia nodded and sped up. It didn't take long for them to stop, and a pavilion was before them. It had 7 levels and covered a huge area of land. Xianxia looked up, and he saw 3 dazzling words at the top of it. Sky Treasure Pavilion. Its owner is extraordinary. Meanwhile, Nancy Yin suddenly said, "It's someone that even the 3 hallowed grounds have to give face to. Let's go." Nancy Yin led him in, and it didn't take long for a young man to greet them. He was about to speak when Nancy Yin withdrew a golden card, and it made the young man's expression change. The young man bowed respectfully to her and said, "Honored guest, please wait a moment." He turned around and entered the inner area of the pavilion. Meanwhile, Nancy Yin waved the golden card at Xianxia and smiled. "A VIP card of the Sky Treasure Pavilion. A gold one too, right? There's a violet card above the gold card, and then there's nothing above that." Xianxia asked, "What are you trying to say?" She shook her head. "What a blockhead. Do you know how difficult it is to become a VIP of the Sky Treasure Pavilion, and especially a gold one?" Xianxia shook his head. "I don't know." Nancy Yin was about to say something when a pretty woman in a green dress walked out from the inner area of the pavilion. She walked over to Nancy Yin and smiled. "I didn't expect an honored guest to come to such a remote place. I'm Ming Shui, the manager here. If it's within my ability, I won't refuse any request. Nancy Een said, I need a sound shuttle. Right now. A sound shuttle. Ming Shui was slightly stunned, and then she seemed quite hesitant. Nancy Een frowned. What is it? Ming Shui replied, the only sound shuttle in the city has been booked, and the customer has paid the deposit. I can't cancel it for no reason. So, how about I prepare a cloud shuttle for you? A cloud shuttle? Nancy Een shook her head. It's too slow. Yang Yi suddenly asked, how slow? Nancy Een replied, it'll take at least a month to go where you want. Yang Yi frowned slightly. That's too slow. Are there any other merchant groups in the city? Ming Shui's expression changed slightly when she heard Yang Yi, and then she hurriedly said, I apologize. How about I ask the closest city to send a sound shuttle over there? Nancy Een asked, how long will it take? Ming Shui replied, 2 days at least. Nancy Een gazed at Yang Yi, and he shook his head. I'll travel myself. He turned around and walked away. Nancy Een hurriedly stopped him and said, don't do that. I'll try to get a sound shuttle. Yang Yi could endure it, but she couldn't. Yang Yi was about to speak when Ming Shui suddenly asked, where are you going? Yang Yi replied, the Northern Sky Prefecture. Ming Shui smiled. It just so happens that the other customer is heading in that direction too. So, how about you ride the same sound shuttle? Nancy Een gazed at Yang Yi. Yang Yi hesitated for a moment and nodded. Ming Shui walked towards the side. Follow me. Yang Yi and Nancy Een followed Ming Shui high above the clouds, and there was a colossus hidden there. It was the cloud shuttle. It was shaped like a ship, but there was a difference. Both ends of it were extremely sharp. Meanwhile, a woman walked out of it. She was around the age of 20 and wore a cloud-white dress. She couldn't be called very beautiful, but she wasn't ugly either. She seemed extremely gentle and delicate. There was a small black bird on her shoulder. Ming Shui walked over to the woman and said a few words. In the end, the woman glanced at Yang Yi and Nancy Een before nodding. Ming Shui visibly relaxed when she witnessed this, and then she gazed at Yang Yi and Nancy Een. Please come in. They nodded and flew up into the sound shuttle. The woman grinned at them. Yang Yi was about to speak when a chill suddenly ran down his spine. It just happened out of nowhere. What's going on? Yang Yi suddenly looked up at the small bird on her shoulder. It was a completely pitch-black fist-sized bird. At this moment, Yang Yi noticed that it only had a single leg, and it was looking at him. It was just looking at him. The bird's eyes were pitch-black. No matter how he looked at it, it didn't seem special. However, Yang Yi felt a chill run down his spine when it looked at him. It wasn't ordinary. Yang Yi was about to speak when the woman suddenly patted the bird, and it immediately lowered its head and stopped looking at Yang Yi. After that, she grinned at Yang Yi and entered her own room. Meanwhile, Nancy Een suddenly said, she's not ordinary. Yang Yi glanced at Nancy Een and didn't say a word. He just walked into his room. Nancy Een shrugged. Do you have to be so arrogant? Meanwhile, in a room, the woman gazed at the bird, and her lips moved slightly. She seemed to be talking to it. The woman suddenly asked, the shaman race's aura? The bird nodded slightly. She frowned a little. Are you sure? The bird hesitated for a moment, shook its head, and then its beak started moving. A short while later, the woman's frown deepened. In Yang Ye's room, Yang Yi had just sat down cross-legged, and then Ho Qing's voice resounded in his mind. Kid, you must remember that while you're amongst the human race, you must never expose the aura of the shaman race that you carry. Otherwise, you'll be in a huge amount of trouble. This isn't the lower universe, and you can't just deter everyone by killing a few people. The more you kill, and the stronger those people are, the more the human race will refuse to let you live. The aura of the shaman race. Yang Yi spoke solemnly. I know. I've used the sword domain to suppress it. Ho Qing sighed softly. Kid, the sword domain isn't almighty. Besides various powerful experts, there are other beings with strange and extraordinary talents, or even some treasures. Sai, just be careful. Yang Yi nodded. He was being careful. After all, it wasn't fun to be pursued by those so-called righteous people. After talking with Ho Qing for a while, Yang Yi went to the cultivation room. Yang Lianshuang and the others were here, but at this moment all of them were cultivating. Yang Ye's gaze descended onto Sky Maiden. At this moment, her entire body was emanating faint black light, and she seemed like a tiny vortex. Ho Qing's voice suddenly resounded. Her cultivation technique isn't ordinary. Yang Yi asked, "What do you mean?" Ho Qing replied, "I don't know. It's just a feeling. She's undergoing a qualitative transformation. Once she succeeds, she'll become extremely terrifying." Yang Yi shook his head. "But it's taking too long. Too long." Ho Qing replied, "This isn't a long time at all. Some even cultivate behind closed doors for 100 years to cultivate a cultivation technique or combat technique. To a certain extent, the longer it takes to cultivate, the better the technique is. So, if she succeeds, it'll definitely be extraordinary." Yang Yi glanced at her and nodded. He hoped for that too. Yang Yi didn't disturb all of them. He just sat down cross-legged and placed his sword by his side. The sword instantly vanished on the spot. It had gone to Snowy. Even though Snowy was quite mischievous, she was still kind and pure. So, she was loved by beings naturally formed from the world and conscious beings alike. Yang Yi smiled and closed his eyes. It didn't take long for faint golden light to appear around him. The gold form. He wasn't just at the divine realm of strength. He possessed the gold form. It could be said that ordinary enlightened realm experts couldn't harm him at all. Besides that, he'd merged everything he'd learned in the past, simplified them, and improved them. So his attacks were even simpler and sharper. Besides that, he had the sword domain. He was slowly developing the sword domain and not just defensively. Activating the sword domain in battle wasn't just able to suppress his opponents, it could improve the strength of his attacks. It could be said that while he was just at the 6th stage of the true realm, ordinary enlightened realm experts were nothing before him. However, Yang Yi knew that such strength was far from sufficient in the upper universe. He had many things that he wanted to do, and the precondition for them is possessing powerful strength. Cultivate. Besides ceaselessly improving his sword techniques, Yang Yi had to work hard on improving his cultivation. His cultivation was his foundation, so he naturally wouldn't overlook it. He believed that once he attained the enlightened realm, his strength would undergo a qualitative change. The fruit of rebirth and energy pearls. Yang Yi withdrew them all. Improving his cultivation required a huge amount of spirit energy. Fortunately, he had no shortage of that. Time trickled by. 3 months had passed in the primordial pagoda. At this moment, the aura Yang Yi emanated was growing stronger and stronger, but he immediately restrained it every single time. Just like that, Yang Yi sat there in a meditative state for 2 months. At this moment, the aura he occasionally released even made the surrounding space tremble. Suddenly, Yang Yi opened his eyes. Huff! Yang Yi released a mouthful of foul air, and there was a trace of disappointment in his eyes. He hadn't attained the enlightened realm, but he'd touched the barrier between him and the enlightened realm. He wanted to charge through it, but he'd clearly failed. "You can't rush it." Suddenly, Ho Qing said, "It's very good that you were able to touch the barrier between the realms. You just need a fortuitous encounter, and you'll be able to blast it open with ease. But some people aren't able to come into contact with the barrier throughout their lifetimes." Yang Yi smiled. "I understand." He wasn't very disappointed, because while he hadn't attained the enlightened realm, his gains throughout these few months had been really good. He'd fortified his cultivation, and it was very solid now. Besides that, he'd comprehended many things related to the sword Tao. Yang Yi left the primordial pagoda, and there was a knock on his door. Yang Yi said, "Come in." The door opened, and Nancy Yin was there. She sized up Yang Yi and said, "We're almost at Northern Sky City." Yang Yi walked over to her, looked her in the eyes and said, "I don't know what you want, but I advise you not to follow me. I don't have any other ability but the ability to cause trouble." "I'm not joking," she said. "Are you trying to cast me aside after I've helped you?" Yang Yi shook his head. He was about to speak when she suddenly smiled. You wouldn't be able to get to Broken Cliff Mountain without my help. Xianxia asked, "What do you want?" She blinked. "Nothing. I just think it's fun because I've never been to the shaman dimension. As for you, you're going there, right?" Xianxia said, "Do as you please." As soon as he finished speaking, he walked around her and left the room. A playful smile curled up on the corners of Nancy Yin's lips. How interesting. Even with that damn woman's ability, she was actually unable to discover your background. Interesting, truly interesting. Xianxia walked to the corner of the sound shuttle's front. There was a thin barrier of light around there, and it protected the sound shuttle's passengers from its high speeds. The boundless starry sky was outside the barrier. The boundless starry sky wasn't any different to the starry sky in the lower universe. It was similarly vast and deep. Suddenly, a woman appeared by Xianxia's side. She looked up towards the distance and spoke softly. "You've come to Northern Sky City to head to the shaman dimension?" Xianxia turned to glance at her, and then he said, "So what if I am? So what if I'm not?" She grinned. "What do you think of the shaman race?" Xianxia looked her in the eyes. "What are you trying to say?" She smiled. "Nothing. I'm just asking. Is it very difficult for you to answer?" Xianxia withdrew his gaze and said, "What do I think about the shaman race? I don't think anything about it. That's my answer." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What would you do if you encountered someone from the shaman race?" Xianxia spoke indifferently. "Nothing." She slowly clenched her left fist. "You're a human. As a human, you actually won't do anything to the shaman race." Xianxia turned to look at her. "All the humans are good, and all the shamans are bad?" She looked him in the eyes and didn't say a word. Xianxia continued, "Perhaps there's some sort of enmity between you and the shaman race, but why do you have to place that enmity onto others? Since you hate the shaman race, you want others to hate the shaman race too. That isn't very good, isn't it?" She suddenly grinned. "You have quite a good impression of the shaman race." Xianxia replied, "My opinion of the human race and shaman race is the same. As far as he was concerned, the shaman race was made out of humans, and the human race was made out of humans too. Even though he had enmity with the sovereign of man, he didn't eye the entire human race with hostility. He wasn't a madman. Moreover, the sovereign of man couldn't represent the entire human race. As for the shaman race, he hadn't even come into contact with them, so he would naturally not be hostile towards them. The enemies of the human race. As far as he was concerned, it was just some tricks those in power were playing. Simply speaking, Xianxia had his own views and opinions, and he wouldn't just follow what others said. The woman fell silent when she heard him. A short while passed before she suddenly looked up at Xianxia. "I sense the aura of the shaman race coming from you." Xianxia looked her in the eyes. "So what?" She gazed at Xianxia, and then the corners of her lips suddenly curled up slightly. An instant later, a blood-red mark appeared at the center of her forehead. It was shaped like a sword, and it flickered with faint red light. Meanwhile, Ho Qing's anxious voice resounded in Xianxia's mind. "Kid, she's a shaman hunter. Run." As soon as Ho Qing finished speaking, a dark red pike suddenly stabbed Xianxia's chest. Hiss! The pike pierced through his skin with absolute ease, and it continued straight forward towards his heart. Xianxia naturally didn't just sit there and wait for death to arrive. As soon as the pike stabbed through his skin, he'd vanished on the spot. Xianxia glanced at his chest as he stood far away. There was a hole there and blood was seeping out incessantly. Meanwhile, Ho Qing's voice resounded again. "Kid, be careful of her weapon. Her weapon was specially made to pierce the defenses of our shaman race. No, kid, don't get locked in battle with her. Run immediately or you'll be in big trouble. Run." Xianxia shook his head because that wasn't his style. He gazed at her, and she suddenly said, "You really do have the shaman race's bloodline." A drop of blood was burning on her pike. It was Xianxia's blood. She looked up at him and said, "As a human, cultivating the cultivation techniques of the shaman race is a serious offense. You deserve death." As soon as she finished speaking, her pike shot forward. As soon as it arrived before him, she was behind the pike, and she grabbed it and twisted it. Yang Yi looked her in the eyes while a cold glow flashed through his eyes, and then he pressed his middle and index fingers together before tapping them forward. A ray of light coiled around the tip of his fingers. Bang! As soon as their attacks came into contact, the pike shook violently, but Yang Ye's fingers were pulled back as if he'd been shocked by electricity. At the same time, he moved around 1 kilometer back. Yang Yi glanced at his fingers. They'd cracked open, and he would have lost them if he was just a little slower. He looked up at the pike in the woman's grasp, and he truly understood how strong it was as a counter for his physical body. Ho Qing's voice was quite anxious. "Kid, stop trying to fight her. You'll be in big trouble once she places a blood brand on you. Even I wouldn't dare to go head-on against people from the Shaman Hunter clan. Listen to me and flee right now. Flee." Yang Yi laughed bitterly. "Senior, I think it's too cowardly to flee just like that." As he spoke, he looked up at the woman, and then he took a step forward and tapped his fingers forward again. The space before her suddenly tore open, and then a ray of light flashed out and slashed down towards her. She closed her eyes slowly while clenching tightly to the pike in her right hand. An instant later, a ray of red light surged out from the blood-red sword-shaped mark on her forehead. Bang! Yang Ye's sword energy was blasted into bits, and the ray of red light didn't slow down at all as it shot towards Yang Yi. Meanwhile, Yang Yi had vanished on the spot, and he was behind her when he appeared again. This time, there was a sword in his grasp. He drew it. A sword howl resounded, and then a beam of sword energy slashed down towards her from above. At the same time, the woman turned around and stabbed her pike upwards. Bang! Yang Yi remained on the spot while she was blasted over 1 kilometer away. Swords! Suddenly, Yang Ye's voice resounded, and then 10 ethereal swords appeared around the woman. A moment later, rays of light crisscrossed and enveloped her. The sword control technique. Presently, he could fight both at close quarters and from afar. The swords emanated rays of light as they surrounded her like a storm of swords. During this period, the woman had broken a few of the swords, but as soon as they vanished, a new one would immediately appear to take its place. They were endless. Night Crow. Suddenly, the woman's voice resounded. A moment later, an extremely terrifying aura swept out from her, and then Yang Ye's swords were shattered. At the same time, a black bird appeared above her. It was completely pitch black and had a single leg. Yang Yi had seen that bird before. It had been on her shoulder when they first met, but at this moment it was much larger than it had been. Yang Yi stood there with his sword in hand. He stretched out his hand and made a provoking gesture at the bird. "Come!" A vicious glow immediately flashed through its eyes, and then it flapped its wings and transformed into a ray of black light that shot towards Yang Yi. Yang Yi was about to swing his sword when it suddenly opened its mouth. Screech! A sharp cry resounded, and it surged straight into Yang Ye's ears. In an instant, Yang Yi felt extremely uncomfortable. His eardrums hurt, and it felt like something had torn them open. In that exact same instant, the bird suddenly flew over to Yang Yi, and then its claws grabbed onto Yang Ye's shoulders. It intended to tear him apart. Suddenly, a ray of golden light appeared around Yang Yi. The gold form. At this moment, Yang Yi didn't dare act carelessly, and he activated the gold form. His mind instantly cleared up once he used the gold form. Meanwhile, he felt the bird's claws trying to tear him apart. It hurt. At this moment, Yang Yi felt quite a bit of lingering fear, because if he hadn't used the gold form, it was very likely that he would have been torn apart. Yang Yi didn't give it any further thought, and he just raised his sword and stabbed. Bang! The bird was blasted away. Meanwhile, the woman appeared before Yang Yi with her pike in hand. The cold glow in Yang Ye's eyes transformed into viciousness when he saw her stab her pike at him. He was furious. Yang Yi took a step forward, and then a wave of mysterious energy suddenly appeared here. The sword domain. This time, he'd utilized the sword domain. Yang Yi instantly vanished on the spot. Split second. The woman's expression changed drastically. Hiss! A moment later, her pike was suddenly split into two. At the same time, one of her arms flew up into the air. Yang Yi was about to attack when Nancy Yin suddenly appeared before him. "You can't kill her." Yang Yi frowned. He was about to speak when Nancy Yin grabbed his arm. "Leave right now." Ho Qing suddenly said. "Listen to her and leave immediately. You won't be able to kill her quickly with that bird by her side. Leave now or it'll be extremely difficult for you to leave later." Ho Qing's tone was very serious. Yang Yi didn't insist and he nodded. Yang Yi glanced at the woman. At this moment, she was looking at him too. An instant later, Yang Yi and Nancy Yin vanished on the spot. Once they left, she glanced at her arm and spoke softly. "The sword domain." Suddenly, a blood-red triangular formation of light appeared in front of her. The woman spoke indifferently. "You're too late." Far away in the sky, Yang Yi shot through the sky on his sword, and Nancy Yin was by his side. Yang Yi closed his eyes and asked inwardly, "Senior, what are shaman hunters?" Ho Qing explained, "An ancient clan that's very mysterious. My shaman race wasn't able to determine their origins even after using every resource at our disposal. All we do know is that they are extremely hostile against our shaman race. No, I should say that their mission is to hunt the members of our shaman race. They specialize in hunting the shaman race." Yang Yi frowned. "Do they have some sort of deep enmity with the shaman race?" "I don't know." Ho Qing continued. "The shaman progenitor and some others acted against them in the past, but their clan still exists until now. So you understand why I asked you to leave immediately, right? Because you really can't afford to offend them. At the very least, you can't afford to offend them right now." Yang Yi said, "I don't want to offend them. They want to offend me." Ho Qing said, "Kid, it's best to make compromises when facing them. Otherwise, once you kill one of them, you'll be pursued endlessly. I'm not joking. Even offending the sovereign of man is better than offending them. Otherwise," Yang Yi said, "Senior, I don't want to offend them. Didn't you see? They want to kill me." Ho Qing fell silent for a short while and said, "If you can't afford to offend them, you can avoid them, right?" Yang Yi shook his head. "Hide from them? It won't solve anything. The only way to solve problems is the fist. Only strength can resolve problems. Reason with them? Of course that was possible. But it was under the circumstances that one possessed sufficient strength. Just think about it. Would an elephant ever reason with an ant?" As if he knew what Yang Yi was thinking, Ho Qing added, "Kid, you must realize that you really don't have the strength to fight the shaman hunter clan right now. Isn't there a saying in the human race? A moment of forbearance brings a lifetime of peace." Yang Yi grinned. "Let's not talk about that. Now, let's rush to the shaman dimension." "Right, to the shaman dimension." Ho Qing continued. "Even though the shaman hunter clan is mysterious and powerful, so long as you go to the shaman dimension, they will be helpless against you. They don't have the ability to cause trouble in the shaman dimension." Yang Yi nodded and restrained his thoughts. In the outside world, as soon as Yang Yi opened his eyes, he saw a pair of eyes looking at him. Their owner was Nancy Yin, of course. Yang Yi asked, "What are you looking at?" She sized up Yang Yi and replied, "Do you really have the shaman race's bloodline?" Yang Yi nodded. "What? You're afraid?" Nancy Yin shook her head. "I'm not afraid, but you're definitely going to die. Do you know who was the one who tried to kill you? Someone from the shaman hunter clan. They're extremely terrifying. The sovereign of man once recruited an expert from the shaman race, but in the end, that fellow died. The sovereign of man sealed off all information about it, so outsiders aren't aware of it. However, I know that he was killed by the shaman hunter clan." Yang Yi asked, and Nancy Yin replied, "Even though the shaman hunter clan is very powerful, my clan doesn't fear them. So, come back home with me. My clan needs a guard. Help us with that and I'll keep you alive. All right?" Yang Yi was about to speak when a terrifying aura appeared far away in the sky. "They're back." Nancy Yin smiled. "You still have time to agree right now." Yang Yi ignored her and looked up at the sky. Meanwhile, Ho Qing said, "Retreat for now." Yang Yi shook his head, took a deep breath, and then looked up into the sky. A vicious glow flashed through his eyes. Do you really fucking think I'm that easy to bully? A sword howl suddenly resounded from Yang Ye's sword,